Well, hello, folks. I want to deal with a key concept here, bit of vocabulary. That's interesting. I was listening to the Overshoot podcast, the Overpopulation podcast. It used to be called, now it's Overshoot. And Jean-Baptiste Frison, he's an interesting guy. Writes on energy and history, the history of energy and all that stuff. So, one book he published is called More, More, More. And it's fascinating and very important. And it's really interesting to know that discussion of ideas concerning overshoot and energy use, uh, the idea of energy transitions and so on have gone back for over 100 years. So it's nothing new. What happens is we are incentivized by neoclassical economics, neoliberal economics, Chicago school, Austrian school, whatever. And the name of the game is to produce profit making goods and services and to grow that all the time. So, without getting into inequality and all that stuff, that's what drives everything. So, there's no energy transition anyway. I think you should listen to that podcast. And on another podcast, Planet Critical, you can download or copy and paste a transcript of the conversation, which might help some of you who like to read things instead of listen to things. But I guess since you're here, you probably wouldn't mind listening to the podcast. It's very interesting. There's no energy transition that's coming. Degrowth is the thing. We have to learn how to live differently. Unfortunately, we have to give all this up. And nobody wants to hear that, so we're in deep shit. Because it just means that the consequences of not taking the bull by the horns, as it were, and dealing with facts of nature and physics and biology, we're setting ourselves up for a tragic collapse, okay? And nobody knows how long a collapse will take. But we are collapsing, whether you like to know it or not. He points out a lot, Frozol, that we have tons and tons of coal. And of course, various kinds of coal are necessary for everything. So he made a point on the podcast that your car is primarily coal. It's just, to make a car, you need coal. You need coal for steel, and steel drives everything, and concrete and all that kind of thing. You need that energy, that really powerful energy. China is built on coal. Asia is built on coal. America was built on coal. Germany. And there's nothing available to replace it. And all these technologies that we fantasize about are just fantasies. They won't work. They're not economical, not feasible, not anytime soon. And so, this is just a kind of marketing feature, right? Greenwashing. A lot of these climate change shows you can see on YouTube or on PBS or wherever, they're more like, marketing arms for companies that are creating solutions to energy transition or green technologies or whatever. This is nonsense because the energy and materials required to create these products at the end of the day just require our using more energy from all sources. So biofuels, oil and gas, coal, solar, wind power, uh, nuclear power, and so on and so forth. So you really have to look at the energy breakdown of things. How much electricity do we use here and there? What kind of energy is required to do certain kinds of things? So if you think about all these technologies, like nuclear power plants and so on, how much energy is required to build that, and so on and so forth, materials. Anyway, I don't want to get into that because I'm going to talk about this concept, disinhibition. And I'm going to read off the notes I put together to get through it fast. So disinhibition is a key concept related to the past 200 years of fossil fuel, modern techno-industrial, energy-intensive, materials-intensive civilization. And modernity is a big deal, but we can go, in terms of energy use and, just the way human beings buzzsaw through the world, using up everything they can and growing at a tremendous rate, was, it spiked big time. It went straight up from the Industrial Revolution to today. Nothing at all is curtailing our use of energy. So in a psychological context, disinhibition refers to a temporary or persistent loss of inhibitory control that leads to impulsive or inappropriate behaviors or actions that lack social decorum. Lack of control, disinhibition, is the opposite of inhibition, right? Which is the ability to restrain impulses and behaviors. Impulsivity. People experiencing disinhibition may act on a whim without considering the potential consequences of their actions or words. Socially inappropriate behavior. Disinhibition can manifest as rude, tactless, or hurtful comments, sexual comments, inappropriate flirting, or undressing in public places, things like that. But think about it, social norms and so on. Go back to the 19th century, Victorian England or something, and look at the way people dressed. So examples of disinhibition would be different in that context. So it is culturally embedded, and we have to think of the context and so on when we talk about disinhibition, telling dirty jokes around the water cooler, or in the 1950s, slapping your secretary on the behind or something like that. Things change over time, but impulsivity is the key here. Socially inappropriate behavior. These are social constructs, cultural emergent behaviors and constructs. Causes, okay? Disinhibition occurs because of various factors, including certain medical conditions, substance use, or even online interactions. So we can imagine that, right? 4chan or whatever, and a lot of these subreddits and places we spend time on the internet, social media, and so on, they have different rules, different cultures, different rules of how to behave, how to communicate, and so on. And we all know about that, right? You go to somebody's Facebook page and they tell you what's required for membership in the group and so on. Sometimes, you just go off the rails and start being rude and crazy and so on. So causes. Disinhibition occurs because of various factors, including certain medical conditions, substance use, or even online interactions. So beer goggles, drug use, and things like that. Or you could be on this autism spectrum or something, perhaps, and or maybe Asperger's syndrome, or what's the other thing? Anyway, so online disinhibition. The online environment can sometimes amplify disinhibited behavior, as anonymity and asynchronous communication can lead people to say or do things they might not in real life. So you say something and there's no immediate feedback from your audience or the person you're communicating to, sending messages on WhatsApp or whatever. And anonymity, you may feel empowered to do inappropriate things because nobody knows who you really are. We use pseudonyms and nicknames, like my name is Stephen, but I say Buliamti, long story. But anyhow, people can misbehave online. We see that all the time. Bullying and, all that kind of thing. Examples: impulsive spending money without a budget or plan. And think about all the online marketing being tracked, and they know what you're looking for and what you want, and overnight deliveries and cheap stuff, Temu and Amazon.com, and all kinds of other things, ways to trade online and through apps and whatever. And suddenly you're just spending money without even thinking about it. Aggressive outbursts, losing control and reacting with anger or aggression. Think about Karens and people getting pissed off on airplanes in the States and so on and so forth. Culture breaks down and people just start acting really weird because there's no cultural continuity or cohesiveness. And you see this in the hip new veering towards religion again, but not embedded culturally. The new ortho bros, Orthodox or Catholics, but they're not really in a Catholic community. They weren't raised Catholic, so they have different ideas about what it means, and these are tied into the culture wars and so on. So misconduct, engaging in behaviors that are socially unacceptable or illegal. And then there's a bunch of other ones like hyperorality, which is weird, but excessive eating or chewing on non-food items, glasses, pens, I don't know. There's a bunch of other examples like that. Disinhibition is a symptom or characteristic of conditions like dementia, frontal temporal dementia, FTD, ADHD, and other neurodegenerative diseases. Obviously, drinking ain't good for your thinking either. So I notice when I just don't have any wine for like 2 weeks, just my brain works so much better. But I love having wine at lunch. Not every day, but I still do. And, it affects your thinking and your ability to communicate and so on. So online disinhibition effect, according to Wikipedia: anonymity, asynchronous communication, and empathy deficit contribute to online disinhibition. So there is a lack of empathy, right? And sometimes with the information fire hose, we zone out. It's too much information and we can't deal with it. We have cognitive dissonance and other things like that. And so we just, have no empathy anymore. Like, why would I care about these people anymore? Nobody else cares about them. Or your loyalties and your sympathies with certain groups can evaporate because you're just sick of the stuff they're doing, or sick of hearing about it, or whatever. But there's a lot of reasons for that, but empathy and compassion just kind of disappear. There has to be a social, cultural context for these kinds of feelings, in particular empathy, moral sentiments, and compassion and stuff like that. And sometimes we need to be embedded in a culture where those values are sacred, important, and encouraged before we can really experience that kind of empathy or compassion. So, moving on, I wanted to talk about disinhibition and systemic risks concerning a little bit healthcare technology, energy, information, and linking economic growth models to ecological unsustainability. So, what way we're living now is utterly and absolutely unsustainable, and no magical trick is going to change that. We don't have the aliens coming to save us. Jesus isn't going to fix it. The tech bros aren't going to fix it. As I said yesterday, kind of rambling, these guys have their own desire to control information and technology and materials and energy and culture because they have projects they want to do. And a lot of their projects are utterly delusional and mad, insane, and undoable, unworkable. But it doesn't matter. And they need to distract you and they need to have you focus on other things like the Chinese are coming to get you. What if the Chinese get this technology? We're finished. What if we collaborated with China to make the technology align with human values that took into account sustainability and mental health and physical health and the health of the ecosystem and so on, instead of just having ecocidal competition all the time? What if? Imagine that. So disinhibition manifests in a societal context as a lack of restraint in pursuing and adopting technologies and energy consumption prompted by the promise of economic growth. So the whole idea is everything's booming. Trump's going, it's going to boom. The economy is going to boom. Everything's going to boom. I think everything's going to kaboom. But anyway, that's my opinion. So for Trump, he doesn't care what happens with the stock market or with people getting fired or any of this stuff. In his mind, everything's going to boom. So you're waiting for the prices to go down and your salaries to go up and to make money on the next crypto trade or bond ladder or other investments, or you're hoping that your pensions are going to go up when the stock market rebounds and so on and so forth. And, there's all this promise, and you can have more, like our friend's book, all the time. Don't worry, you're going to be able to afford that car, even though right now it's $6,000 more expensive than it was yesterday because of tariffs and whatnot. All of this stuff is irrational, but I think that players of the great game, the real players who are doing stuff and know what they're doing, like distractions like the leadership in the EU and in the White House, because it keeps people focused on things that don't matter, things that are batshit crazy, while they get on with their insanely delusional projects. And these are selfish projects. I want to be an immortal robot and travel around the universe harnessing energy and stuff for whatever reason. Because I want to be God. So there's always that promise, right? Buy the lottery ticket. Somebody's got to win. But we're playing literally with our lives here, and also the potential misery of a more rapid, chaotic collapse, as opposed to degrowth, a managed shift of cultural paradigms and so on. In healthcare, this can lead to the unchecked implementation of new, potentially risky technologies without fully understanding the long-term consequences. Regarding energy information, disinhibition can mean the rapid dissemination and acceptance of energy-intensive technologies without considering their environmental impact. So an example is, if we got rid of cars, we would and used public transportation and shifted the way we do things, and we had emergency vehicles and logistic vehicles and so on, our energy consumption would go way down immediately because it uses a lot. And if we did agriculture differently, our energy would go down immediately. But, there are trade-offs for all this stuff, right? For all these ideas. And sometimes we can't contemplate the trade-off. It's just too scary. I can't do that. I don't want to do that. Mommy, give me the ice cream. I want it morning, noon, and night. And so we have this kind of metabolic syndrome going on our planet now. And the idea is not to fix the causes of the problem, but to invent solutions, drugs and technology, whatever. So we don't understand the long-term consequences and the secondary effects, and third and fourth order effects, whatever, like that. And so we're constantly catching up. So regarding energy information, disinhibition can mean the rapid dissemination of acceptance of energy intensive. Okay, I did that one. This lack of foresight and control exacerbates the inherent difficulty in regulating or eliminating technologies once they achieve significant market penetration, even when their destructive secondary effects become apparent. So once you're there, it's hard to take it back, right? You've crossed the Rubicon. You're using all this stuff already. People are accustomed to it, acculturated to it. They can't live without it anymore. And so, you just can't turn around. You can't turn that ship around. The other thing is, it's really hard to regulate things. Once they're out there, what the proper way of doing stuff is to figure out this second, third order effects in the beginning, and what the consequences of using technology is, or a machine is, or something is, a drug is. And then you once you've decided if it's worth it or not, then you set up the regulations before you roll it out to the market. But in a market economy, that doesn't work. And the players hate regulations, they hate government, they hate democracy. They want to be in charge of doing what they're doing and controlling your addictions, your addiction bundle, if you will, your bundle of addictions, so that they can continue doing whatever the fuck they want to do. Once it's in the market, it's almost impossible to get it out, right? Economic growth versus ecological limits. Both neoclassical and neoliberal economic models prioritize perpetual economic growth, a concept fundamentally at odds with a complex, evolving ecosystem's finite resources and delicate balance. And the balance, it's complex as hell. Living systems and physics and everything else, energy. This pursuit of endless expansion directly clashes with reality, as highlighted by the Jevons paradox, where increased efficiency leads to increased consumption, and the maximum power principle, which suggests systems maximize energy throughput, often at the expense of stability. Our current socioeconomic system, driven by this growth imperative, demonstrates that technology alone cannot reconcile continuous expansion with a healthy biosphere, including human well-being, for much longer. So, in fact, we're in decline and collapse, whether we like to acknowledge it or not. Climate change is just one of the symptoms. There's a million others if you look around. I read this thing about the plastics in the ocean again. It's a nightmare, man. It's crazy. But, economic growth, we need to have a lot of plastic containers and stuff to keep the stock market going. The destructive nature of unfettered growth, as critiqued by thinkers like Jean-Baptiste Frisson and Bill Rees, the relentless pursuit of growth is a primary driver of numerous interconnected crises. These include the sixth mass extinction, accelerating global heating, unsustainable materials use, and rampant consumerism, pervasive pollution, the unfolding polycrisis, escalating wars and war propaganda, and international conflict related to all kinds of things, basically just rivalrous, competition. You know, the planet is exhibiting severe metabolic syndrome, in quotes. I want to use that metaphor from this unsustainable throughput. The promises of corporatists and technologists to solve these problems through further technological advancements within the same growth-oriented system are self-serving illusions and delusions designed to consolidate their power and wealth through initiatives like the TESC-REAL bundle. So that involves, and you can look all these up individually if you want to, transhumanism. What's that mean to people? Extropianism, singularitarianism, modern cosmism, rationalism, effective altruism, and long-termism. So imagine if you're thinking that, well, there's going to be uploaded into, well, there won't be any people in the future, no biological Homo sapiens sapiens, but there will be all these humanoid robots flying around the universe. And we have to sacrifice our world for all these future things that are going to happen. And people, these entities with these artificial souls or what the fuck ever, that are going to Borg-like run around the universe doing their Star Trekian stuff and their, Star Warsian conquest of everything in the universe type stuff. And so we should be willing to sacrifice a little. If it means that 8 billion of us have to die so that a couple 100 million of these TESC-REAL super bros who know better than everybody on the planet what's important, then, that might have to happen. And we should accelerate that. We should have it happen sooner than later, because if we wait too long, the Chinese are going to get there first, or we're going to lose our window of opportunity because we'll all be dead due to the polycrisis and all that stuff. So we got to get going now. So anarcho-capitalism is important. Libertarian capitalism is important. We got to push all these things, artificial intelligence, more of these huge data centers, more and more chips, and more energy use, and forget about slowing that down. It's not going to happen. And the idea that we're going to electrify everything through solar power and wind power and nuclear power and all that is a joke. It can't be done. In particular, the way it's been done over the last couple hundred years, which is incredibly materials intensive. We need so much steel and concrete and all this kind of stuff to continue growth the way we've known it. So there is a degrowth thing going on, but I think for a lot of these players, it just means we're going to do our projects and fuck you if it kills you. And by the way, please go into Ukraine and fight the Russians. Please get ready. Taiwanese people, Japanese people, South Korean people, Australian people, Filipino people, to go and fight China for us. Because there's no way we can field a standing army big enough to invade China. So, and by the way, we might have to use tactical nukes if it comes to that, unless you guys want to do the dying and the fighting for us. In the meantime, Taiwanese and Chinese people, they keep doing business, regardless of what all the U.S. NGOs are inspiring within Taiwan to create more and more trouble. If the U.S. blockades Taiwan with ships and whatever and continues to tighten the noose, yeah, there's going to be a war. It's going to adversely affect everybody on the planet, including the Taiwanese. We make peace or we're stupid, basically. So the TESC-REAL bundle is a thing. And these ambitions and initiatives while distracting the public with culture wars from the fundamental unsustainability of the current trajectory. So that's the thing, and that's what I wanted to share. So I hope that little bit of vocabulary, disinhibition, is something you can put in your quiver of wonderful concepts. This is not crazy stuff, okay? There's nothing conspiratorial about this. It's all reality based, and if you care to learn about reality, in other words, great nature, you can do it. And you're going to have to adjust your expectations just a wee little bit. I hate to say it. It's not going to make me popular. But anyway, have a great day. Have a wonderful weekend. Bulliam T, out.